Welcome back, everybody, to the 1 year anniversary special of the My Generation podcast. On today's episode, we speak to some of the guests that have been routine features on the My Generation podcast and just celebrate the last year of podcast content. On the show, we've also got an album review from Sammy Bacon, a film review from Harry Munday, and we're featuring live music from the band Renegade, who we've had on the show many times. But first, I'd like to welcome the guests. Woo! And on today's episode of the show, as you can hear, we've got so many wonderful guests back. You probably couldn't make out every individual voice from all that, but I'm going to be going through every single person that we've got coming on today's show, and basically reflecting on, what we were talking about on their episode of the show, looking at what all these people, these wonderful people who've been on the show in the last year have got coming up in the future, and having just a reflection. Obviously, we're doing this My Generation podcast episode over the online mediums through the magical world of the interwebs because of what's happening in the world right now. So I hope wherever you are listening from, you are staying safe and well. But I'd like to throw this all the way back to the very first episode of the My Generation podcast. Someone who's appeared every 13 episodes and will be bookmarking the end of that with this episode now. As you can hear, he still has the cough that he had ever since the first episode of the My Generation podcast. It's Dan Inwood. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm staying indoors. Apparently that's like my normal lifestyle has become some sort of medical advice.
Yep, and we've had you on the show many times, Dan. You've been on the My Generation podcast since the very beginning, and you've seen it grow more than almost anyone else. What's it been like being on this podcast journey with us all?
It's been interesting to hear all the different stories that come out, and you get to hear all of the different stories from like a wide variety of people. That's pretty much my favourite part of it. And, it's nice to hear the format of the show sort of grow and develop as time goes on.
Every time we record with you, unfortunately, the episodes end up, being a little bit shorter than what we actually record. So one day we'll have to release an uncut version where the audience actually hear what you say behind all those bleeped out words.
I think nobody wants that, but
let us know in the comments below. The last episode was episode 39. We spoke about, traveling quite, an interesting discussion about the places you've been. And so Dan, once just before we go to our next person, I just wanted to know from you, are there any places that you're looking to travel once everything's sort of back to normal? What would you say is the next place you want to travel to, and why?
Mount Snowdon.
Nice. And we hope to hear about that on the future of the podcast as we keep going forward. Now, moving swiftly on to Harry Munday. He was on the second ever episode of the My Generation podcast. We spoke about collecting Lego. We've also spoken to Harry about swimming, an eclectic mix every time we have Harry Munday on. And now Harry will be joining the podcast to do film reviews every single week on the show, just like Sammy does with his album reviews. Welcome back to the show, Harry.
Oh, hello.
How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us on this very, special day for the My Generation podcast. Harry, obviously you're going to be coming onto the show to do film reviews now. I wanted to throw the curveball at you. Are there any films you've seen recently that you would recommend?
Oh, one sec, I've got to go find it now. I've got it sitting by my DVD player. The Studio Ghibli one that I've just started watching, Whisper of the Heart.
Whisper of the Heart? I have never even heard of that, Harry. What's it about? Sell it to me.
It's about this young woman who is an aspiring novelist who basically just falls in love with this violin maker who moves to Italy. So she just starts writing love-like novels about him. And then they reunite at the end and it's all happy. It's all mystical as Studio Ghibli stuff is.
Oh, I love a good Studio Ghibli film, and that sounds like a good one. Well, I mean, he hasn't even joined the podcast as an official feature yet, but Harry's already selling his feature well. And Harry, we spoke about collecting. You talked about the DVD collection. Is your DVD collection going strong?
Oh, it has gone over 1,000.
Amazing. I'll be sure to mention that as many times. We need to get like an exact figure roundup, and then you can bring the exact number.
Oh yeah.
1,049, and that number is only going up. So Harry's going to be coming on the show every single Thursday to do film reviews, and I mean he's got to go through 1,049 first before he gets to the new ones, but that's an eclectic mix. Thank you, Harry. We're going to keep talking to Harry throughout the show and all the amazing guests. We're now moving on to Emma Cusson. She's appeared on the show many times as well, but she spoke about photography. And coming up very shortly after the 1 year anniversary of the podcast. We've got her talking about poetry on the show, as well as 2 movies, coincidentally, talking about Her and Lost in Translation. We've recorded both of those episodes. I'm super excited to release them. Emma, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for coming back onto the show. Emma's actually also going to be joining the show as a regular feature to talk about her poetry in more detail. And obviously, Emma, in this time of, where we're all at home, are you writing poetry?
I'm kind of writing bits that I haven't completed. I haven't really started anything new. But some of the ones I've come back to, I've kind of rewrote them with new context because obviously mostly I write about things that have happened in my life and not much is happening right now.
Yeah, fair enough. And Emma's going to be sharing a lot of her old material as well on the show. We've got so many really interesting discussions with her coming up as well. And we talked about Her and Lost in Translation in a future episode. What would you say that episode's about, just to, get people excited for when we come to that discussion?
Without going too much into detail, the 2 directors used to be married and then obviously have now divorced, and the 2 films kind of reflect, and we've discussed either if they're a response or official connection, and I've kind of like connected the dots with things that people said on the internet about it, because to me it was just kind of interesting to see and kind of analyze it.
Yeah, lovely. And we're going to have an even more thorough discussion on that. So if you're a fan of either of those films, stay tuned for that episode. We've now got Sammy Udlamata. We had her way back on the 11th episode of the My Generation podcast talking about mindfulness and meditation, and we hope to expand on that soon. Sammy, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Max.
Sammy, it was the subject we spoke about on, the start of when we had this podcast, and it was in its infancy. What, since we last had that discussion, has occurred in your life to do with meditation and mindfulness?
I think there were periods where I moved away from my practice, and then it's come back in a very strong way over the past couple of months. So yeah, I'm back in the swing of it as such, and it's been really helpful with the current situation around the world. I've been having lots of conversations with different friends as a coping mechanism, and how meditation and mindfulness is actually helping that process. So yeah, it's been very interesting, and it's really nice for me to get back into a much more of a constant practice of it, because I actually have the time. Things got a little bit busy and it went away from me, and I think it's all come back in a very good way. So this timing couldn't have been more perfect, really. And it's quite good to know that it's been a year as well. And yeah,
well, thank you for coming back on. We'll expand on more of that, and reflection and looking forward is going to be big themes on this episode of the show, so do stay tuned for more of that with Sammy. We're now going back over to Connor Jenkins. Connor Jenkins we've had on the show many times. We've spoken to him actually about mental health, specifically within the area of sport. We talked about the power of music, and most recently not poetry, why was I going to say that? That's Emma. Most recently modelling. We'll be talking about actually Dungeons and Dragons very soon, so a massive amount of variety with this man. Connor, welcome back.
Hello, I'm back.
If I throw this all the way back to the start, when we first spoke to you about, it's quite a poignant subject we spoke about first, because it couldn't be more important now at the moment. We were talking about sort of mental health in sport, and for you, how have you been sort of keeping sport in your life throughout this time at home?
Me and my friends have got like a little home gym in our back garden. That's pretty fun. I did a 10K today. That was a good little reminder of what the sun feels like on my skin. Yeah, it's just about keeping going,
And Connor, we're going to be speaking to you very soon on the show. We're going to be doing Dungeons and Dragons. We actually aim to try and bring a few people in this episode. I know Harry's very keen on the Dungeons and Dragons episode. So could you maybe just give us a little tease? It doesn't have to be about the specific story, but for if someone doesn't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, what it is and what we'll be doing on the show.
Yeah, well, long story short, it's like a little role-playing game. It's super fun with friends. It's the more the merrier. It's all based on dice rolling. So you're put in scenarios, in like a kind of Lord of the Rings-esque kind of fantasy make-believe world, and you're given quests and tasks and things to do. But you can control everything about it just by rolling a dice.
Oh, amazing. And from the sort of board game approach and style, we're going to be transitioning over to the virtual gaming with Joe Finnegan. We had Joe firstly on the show doing the Halloween special of the My Generation podcast. That was talking about films, but we've more recently spoken about when Joe did game design work, and also we talked about video games and films, their connections, horror video games as well. Welcome back to the show, Joe.
Hello, Max.
How are you doing today?
Just finished work. Interesting times at the moment, working from home every day.
Although, having things like, video games and movies to watch and consume and, keep people entertained and connected, it's almost as important as ever.
It's one of those things that kind of obviously people are limited at the moment to what hobbies they can actually do. So as someone, I think it was Dan kind of alluded to earlier, it's kind of that lifestyle is actually kind of favoured at the moment because that's something that's a lot more accessible to.
Yeah, and are there any games that you are playing at the minute? Because Joe's also going to be joining the show as a regular feature. So at the moment we've just got Sammy Bacon doing his album reviews, but Joe, Harry and Emma are all joining the My Generation podcast as a featured regular section on the show. Is there a game you're playing at the minute you just wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so one of my friends has just convinced me to get into the Final Fantasy series. You'll probably be familiar with the series as a whole, but there's one of the games is an online only one. It's basically the series version of World of Warcraft is probably the best way to describe it, and it's the 14th version of it. And yeah, I've started playing that, and I've kind of been worried that I'd get addicted to it because it's one of those games that can suck a lot of time out of your life. But yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Nice. And what is it about that game that makes it so unique?
It's just at this time where there's like a lot of sort of tedium going on at the moment with not a lot to do in the house where you're sort of stuck in every day. It's quite relaxing really to go to a game like that and kind of just sort of grind through it for a couple of hours, and yeah, it's just a good time.
Yeah. And Joe's going to be bringing so many more incredible games that you should be playing over the coming weeks and months. His section starting in August, along with Emma, and we've got Harry joining even more before that. In fact, Harry, we're going to be putting one in the show today just to give you a little idea of what's coming, and then, as the show continues to expand, we'll have even more from the four main features. Next, we're going to be taking a trip to the CCSU Drama Society, 3 in a row for features on there, but we're going to be starting with our glorious Sammy Bacon, who is our music extraordinaire. He's based up in London, but studies in Canterbury. Sammy you've heard his voice in every single podcast episode since March, and he's been doing album reviews, and he will be continuing them in the future. Sammy, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Well, thank you for coming back on the show, Sammy. It's great to have you on live for the first time in a while.
Very, very long time. Like what? 5-6 months? Longer?
It's actually way less than that. You can tune into episode 40 to hear me and Sammy talk about his some of his favourite albums. And Sammy, obviously we're spending a lot of time indoors at the minute. If you've had some time to listen to music, what album, if there's one album you've been just listening to in the past couple of days that you've just discovered, has there been one in your life?
There has been. These few weeks have been non-stop. I kind of set myself a task when isolation was enforced to try and listen to one new album a day, which I've pretty much done, give or take a day here and there. But there's one record that I've newly discovered. That's the most annoying question. If there was one record that I've discovered during isolation and I just have to listen to that.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
I would go for The Epic by Kamasi Washington. It's like a 3-hour jazz odyssey, and it's just the best thing I've ever heard. Is
We've rendered Sammy speechless on the show today. And Sammy, every single week he comes prepared with album reviews, and through this time he's going to be listening to so many albums and then bringing them to the show. Albums that you should be listening to as well. If you've heard one of Sammy's album reviews over the past few months and in the near future, so many more to come, then please let us know what you think of them in the comments, whether you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify. We'd love to actually try and get the podcast onto Apple Podcasts, and let us know in those comments if you've been listening along. Now we're going straight into the Drama Society, continuing with that, but we are heading up to the committee, starting with the president of the Drama Society, Alara. She has been on the show a few times before. We talked about the Drama Society on episode 31 of the show. That was with James Green, who came on, and both of them had a really great chat about the Drama Society. And then we had a more recent one, episode 45. She was on with Tom, who is also on the show later. And we had a conversation about voice acting work. Alara, how are you today?
I'm great, Max.
Thank you for joining us. So we've worked on so many great things at the moment, and there's so much work that's still happening even when people are inside, and we're still making things. We spoke about voice acting quite recently, but we've recently done, I'll talk to Tom about this as well. We've recently done some work on a little project together. Could you talk about how you've still been keeping active with acting work in isolation?
Pretty hard for us to do the acting, even we don't even have an audience or someone to actually look into the eyes with, but I think it's going good. I mean, with the production that we're working on, I think that's the whole idea of me keeping sane about this thing, because I have to do some bit of acting, some bit of singing at least, and this production that we keep doing is actually helping me a lot to go through this time.
Lovely. Well, yeah, I think it's so important that we all keep talking. It's why mediums like podcasts and audio dramas are still sticking so strong through this. And we'll be talking to Alara about, a reflection on the past and what's coming up after this later on in the show. And lastly, we've got Tom. Tom is the treasurer of the Drama Society. We spoke to Tom initially about the voice work, because Tom starred in the audio drama Once Said, as did a few people in this chat. Obviously, Alara, Sammy, Harry, scanning if anyone else did. Nope. So Tom was the lead star in there, and Once Said is recently, as of tonight, it will be going out on BBC Radio Kent. We're recording this on the 14th of April, so that should be on BBC Sound still as well, so you can listen to the serialized version of Once Said, which went out on BBC Radio Kent Upload. Looking forward to hearing that tonight and hearing Tom on there as well, and all the other great voices. Tom, what was it like being in Once Said for you?
Once Said was actually an incredible experience for me, because I haven't done much voice work in the past, and then you come along and give me this incredible role, which actually gave me a lot of chance to mix up my voice as well, because we're doing lots of different things. So staying calm, acting as if I was insane, sort of like isolated, a weird bit in the middle which I had to shout in and stuff. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, it did give us a lot of variety, didn't it? Because you went from sort of calm, and then as it went, things got crazy. So people, please, it's on the My Generation podcast YouTube channel, and you can also listen to it on BBC Sounds. It was on BBC Radio Kent Upload with Leo Ulf as a sort of mini series. So that was really, really cool to have it come out in sort of smaller little bite-sized chunks, and keep the podcasting content going through this time. Well, that is everyone that we're bringing on the show today. A really great mix of so many people who have been on the show over the past year. It still blows my mind, really, that it's been a year. So the first topic we're actually going to be speaking about as a group is lessons learned, really, in the last 365 days, because it marks quite a long time, and obviously we've all sort of grown over this time, none more so than Dan Inwood, who was there from the start. I wanted to start with the person who recommended we talk on this reflective manner, which was Sammy. Sammy, did you maybe want to start with some stuff that you've learned over the last year?
I thought it was a good topic to bring up, because it's a point of a year, and a lot of people, the sun going around, Earth going around the sun 365 days, and a few things might have happened in that time. I would say this 2019-2020 year has brought a lot of things personally into my life, and some good, some not so good, and currently everybody's impacted in a global sense. So that's also kind of shown how interconnected we are, to me. Just being grateful, actually, just for the opportunities that we've got given, and challenges we've faced and overcome. So Yeah, really.
Lovely. And what I'd like to do to bring everyone in the discussion is to revisit some of the topics that we've talked about on the podcast with people and see how they're all affecting people and what they've been doing. So obviously on the 39th episode we spoke to Dan Inwood. We spoke about travel, didn't we, Dan? And could you just remind the listeners of where you'd been?
I had recently come back from a trip to Oslo city centre. For a long weekend there, so we spoke about that for some time.
Yeah, and where else have you been throughout the past year?
I've also been to Madrid, and Max, where the hell else have I been? I told you all this, and I don't remember.
Dan, I can't remember, that's why I asked you.
I have been to Mount Snowdon in the last year, so that counts. Where else? Oh my god. Jersey. I've been to Jersey as well in the last year to visit the family I have there.
And I just wanted to open to the floor, really. Has anyone in, any of you guys done any travelling in the last year?
So, I don't know if I told you, Max, but I went to Egypt.
No, you did not.
Earlier on in the year. Yeah, that was amazing, and it was also one of my bucket list activities. So I got to actually see a pyramid, and it's kind of a little bit unbelievable in a way. 2-3 months ago, I was in a different part of the planet, and nobody can travel today. So yeah, I got to see the pyramids. Was on the Nile. I can't recommend it highly enough. It was brilliant. It was a lovely trip. A bit of a culture shock at the same time as well for me, but I really enjoyed it. It was exactly the perspective that I wanted to see. And I got to go to the Museum of Cairo, and that blew my mind. There were mummified crocodiles. They mummified everything. They were a little bit obsessed on the fact. So it was. It'll definitely open your eyes if you get a chance to go there.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like a trip to recommend. I mean, we might end up having to get Sammy to recommend places to visit in the world at this point.
That was the best trip that I did in a few years. It just came up in a very random sort of way. Didn't have anything planned. The opportunity, turned up, and I said, sure, why not? And I just took it and I went. So I would recommend you guys to go there. It's a different part of the world, different culture, different food. Oh, the food was amazing.
Well, I've never been outside Europe, so maybe I'm gonna consider this when everything's sort of more normalized and travels back to normal. Emma, we've obviously talked about you went on a trip to India, and we may end up talking about this on the future of the show. But did you maybe want to elaborate on why you were there, what it was like in India?
And some of the places we went to were just absolutely fascinating. And again, like Egypt, it was a massive culture shock. It was very different the way you just dress, and like you've got to be very mindful of a few things, obviously, like respect to the temples and everything, and mindful of the surroundings and everything, because things are quite dangerous when you're walking around. Like traffic, they have no sense of like traffic direction like we do. It's just kind of like free for all. But yeah, there's like literally it's free for all on the streets. It's terrifying when you're in a tuk-tuk and there's like 5 of you in this like crammed into this tuk-tuk. But yeah, it's crazy. We were playing like games like Spot the most amount of people we could in like on a motorbike and stuff like that, because it was just fun games for us to interact with how they live out there.
Oh, interesting. And yeah, I'd love to elaborate more on that, because that sounds like a fascinating trip that you went on. And I wanted to move across to some of the other subjects that we've spoken about, on the podcast, and looking at what we've done over the last year. And Harry, obviously, we spoke about collecting on the second episode, and we talked DVDs at the start, but we also talked about Lego. And Harry and Tom, I would like, because I know both of you are very avid Lego fanatics, I wanted to talk about your experiences with Lego over the last year.
The issue is, obviously, being a student, you have less money to spend on something such as Lego. So what I've been doing, actually, my experience of that kind of thing is, especially now in isolation, going back through and building loads of old sets while like having a film or an album on in the background. And it's just like a really nice, relaxing thing to do.
And what sets have you got?
I think I've been mainly doing Star Wars ones recently. I did an Imperial shuttle, but then so sometimes if like I've got a set that I really enjoyed building, like the Lego Slave One or something, I'll disassemble that and then reassemble it, make sure I got all the pieces, that kind of thing.
I'm staring at my Slave One right now and like, oh yeah, I mean,
You have
yeah, I
one
have a
too?
Slave One.
Oh man.
It's what it
It is beautiful.
it's one of the best sets, the UCS one, yeah, Tom.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, we're going off on Lego jargon now. I mean, we should probably do another full Lego episode, to be fair, with Tom, Harry, and now Connor. Connor, I had no idea you were a Lego fan.
Dude, I've got a Lego figure of myself.
What?
Did you make it like
Yeah,
from
man, I got-
pieces you had?
No, we went to the store and we got my band made in Lego.
Oh,
Like you
fair
can
enough.
customize your own characters there and put them in little boxes and stuff. It's awesome. Yeah, it was at the shop in Bluewater. the Lego
Oh,
store.
can you? Oh.
Because I know you can do your face mosaic.
Yeah, I know that.
No,
You could, like,
dude,
get
your
your
whole
face
body.
Wow.
Going back to the Slave One rule. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't have a Lego set, but I do. I recently got in touch with my mum who moved, and she unpacked all of my old stuff, and I did unearth some old Star Wars toys. And currently hanging on my wall is a Slave One toy from 1995, which I'm pretty happy about.
Wow.
He's just kind of hanging out there. Obviously, I'm an old man at this point, so that's not. I can't remember that kind of stuff. But dude, I will say definitely prioritize Star Wars in general over Lego, but Lego's definitely got a special.
Yeah, and collecting it's such a universal subject because everyone's got their collecting. I mean, Harry, were you going to add to that about Lego? But you collect Ninjago, don't you, Harry?
Yes, I at one point had every single set that they launched, which was nuts to try and fit that all in one room.
Yeah, I bet that must have been intense. I mean, I'm staring at my Destiny's Bounty Lego set right now, which is the
I love the Destiny's Bounty ones.
yeah, I'm staring at the one from the Lego Ninjago movie, Destiny's Bounty. What? And to be fair, that's one of my favorite sets. What would you say is your favorite set, Harry?
Ironically, my favorite set isn't a Ninjago one. My pride and peace is the Lego Helicarrier that I bought. And my favorite thing was I did it for my 16th birthday. I had quite a bit of money stacked up. I went to Brighton, walked in their Lego shop without any hesitation. I just walked to that Helicarrier. I picked it up and just walked over to the counter. And no word of a lie, you could look around and everyone in the store was looking at me like I was a madman. Just seeing a 6-year-old kid just so confidently pick up a £300 Lego set, like, he's bluffing. He's not going to do it.
He did it.
I did it.
Do you find though that you run out of space with Lego? Like, I mean, my room, I just can't store any of it.
Yeah.
anymore.
I ended up having to install shelves.
I've run out of space as well. A lot of my Lego is boxed up at the minute. In fact, most of it's boxed up except the big sets, which is why I'm staring at my, Death Star, all the ships, and just the Slave One. But do you know what? We could talk forever about Lego, and I think, judging by how this conversation's going, we're going to have to bring Connor, Tom, and Harry back to the show to do a Lego-specific episode. So if that sounds good to you all, keep tuning in on the podcast because I am absolutely sure that we are going to bring that episode to you. I think a very passionate bunch about that. I did want to open the floor still regarding collection for other avenues and areas of collection because I know, Sammy, you collect vinyl, don't you?
I collect vinyl, CDs, at a financially alarming rate is how I describe it.
And so have you bought any albums recently? What's the most recent vinyl you've got?
I bought 2 things. I ordered 2 things today. Who knows when they'll come? I ordered Sister Sister by Lower Plenty, which is this really nice sort of Australian folky thing, which is really cool. And this ambient album called House in the Wave by a group called Primitive Motion, who are really cool. I also bought an album called Plowing to Field of Love by Ice Age, who are this Danish sort of post-punky rockabilly kind of band. That still hasn't come. It's been about 3 weeks at time of recording. Hopefully that turns up, but post people doing the best they can. The beauty that is the post people will not stop me. And got my student loan today, so that's also not going to stop me either. But yeah, no, collecting vinyl is a fun thing. That is one thing I miss. I do miss going to record shops and stuff and just seeing what you find, because that is, I don't know, a big, part of it. Sort of the going in with no sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like preconceptions of what you want, and then.
I do remember me, you, and Harry, Sammy. We went to HMV a couple times and spent a couple, and we spent a sizable amount of time looking for albums for Sammy. That was good fun.
Say it will be a very long time. You can just go. I won't be offended.
But it's no, so you get lost in it, and I love that. It's your passion, isn't it? So, and I did want to go over to Joe. We were talking about video games. Do you collect video games, and do you collect them physically? Do you collect the actual physical copies of games, or is it all online now?
I try and stick to physical copies where I can, because I don't know, it goes for sort of DVDs and that sort of thing as well. I'll still buy physical DVDs rather than like get it. Well, I know you have Netflix and that sort of thing now, and I have a subscription for that, but I still like to have a physical copy of something, just because it's that feeling you get when you buy something, you like open it up for the first time, like that new CD smell.
Joe and Sammy both get it. They know. Sometimes you just can't trade those things with online stuff.
Yeah, I think with games though, it's kind of going to go down the route of being all digital soon though. So yeah, I'm trying to hold out for that. But
during this quarantine, I've spent so Halo, right?
Oh, I love Halo.
But I've
I've
clocked almost 300 hours in the past month on Master Chief Collection. 450 achievements down, 250 left to go. I am wasting my life, and I love it. If I'm being honest, this is the best time to do it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I've been doing exactly the same with Bioshock.
Oh wow.
Oh, I love Bioshock.
Man. Bioshock, what a series.
Exactly the same Bioshock. Yeah, I've just started playing the second one, but I've never played it before, and it's just a really weird concept that you're playing from Big Daddy.
Yeah, the first one's a lot better, I think. I like the second one in some ways, but yeah, the first one I just love.
The third one's my favourite. The third one's definitely my favourite, but I just played through the first one and I finished it, and I was sitting there thinking, let's go back and play it again and get all the achievements. That was the first thought that went through. Go through it and get all the achievements.
I used to be so bad for that. When I had a Xbox 360, this was probably about... Actually, when did that come out? It's probably about 10 years ago now. 6, 7 years, something like that. But I used to be really like... There'd be these games that would have these ridiculous achievements, like reach level 1,000 or something, and it would be the last achievement I have to get in the game. And I'd just be playing the game for like 30 more hours just to make sure I got that last achievement. And in hindsight now, I'm like... Yeah, basically looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, luckily, I've got
for the achievements, dude. That's why you do.
Yeah, that extra 5 points.
No, all the achievements.
You need to flex on everyone else. Come on.
Not some sort of scrub who doesn't get achievements.
Oh, amazing. Well, it's so great that everyone's still so into games. I mean, every time I go on my Xbox now, I see Connor on the Master Chief Collection, and now I know what he's doing. I stopped using my Xbox for a while, and I went back to using it very recently. In fact, I'm doing a solo episode about it, so stay tuned for that, because I only ever used to play Halo, and the wonderful Harry Munday, who's in this chat, showed me the world of Apex Legends, and that's my new favourite game.
I refuse. I know that I'll be hooked, and I don't want that. Anybody else on that Animal Crossing hype at the moment?
I've never actually played those games. It seems like it might be my kind of game, especially at the moment.
Man, my garden is baller.
Well, what you guys don't know is that Connor got so passionate about Animal Crossing that he swore for the first time in the podcast. So,
yeah.
For the viewers, note that it was Animal Crossing that broke him finally. So I just wanted to also move over to some of the other voices in just a moment and keep going with this great discussion. I'm really enjoying what we're talking about. In the next part of the show, I'd actually like to start looking ahead to the next year and what we want to do in that time. But we've got a few features to go to first. Even though we have Sammy Bacon with us live, he still does an album review every single Thursday on the show. Sammy, would you like to intro your own album review?
Yeah. We're going to throw to me, which hasn't actually recorded this yet, but by the time you hear it, he would have, so that's weird. Over to you, Sammy.
Well, hi and hello there, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the My Generation podcast. Today, the recommendation is West of Eden by HMLTD. HMLTD, formerly known as Happy Meal Limited before the lawyers came after them, are a post-punky trap outfit from the UK who are one of the hottest bands in the UK right now, and here's their debut, West of Eden, which is a blend of beautiful synth-pop, spiky, hopefully angular, post-punk, and trap. I know. Weird. Highlight tracks on this album are things like To the Door, which is a post-punky, galloping romp of a track, which then moves into these very slow, sort of glacial transitions where the frontman sings "and I'm moving to Leipzig," then you transition that to a song like Mikey's song, which is just a straightforward synth pop banger, and the song Mikey's song seems to deal with just being obsessed with a person, and there's even a bit in the song where the lead singer sings and it's 3 a.m. and I'm online googling pictures of you. Just this kind of a creepy song under what is a beautifully poppy song. Reminds me a lot of someone like Soft Cell or that, though, some synth poppy band like that. Then you get the track Satan, Luella and I, which is this grandiose, flowing and moving and evolving track with this album is pretty. You also have the song Loaded, which, as I alluded to earlier, does bring in these elements of trap, and there's a gloriously beautiful, sinful chorus, and I sold my soul to the devil tonight. Yeah, HMLTD, brilliant band. Oh no, two songs I forgot to mention. Probably the two most conceptually interesting tracks in this album are the sister tracks, Joanna and Where's Joanna, which deals with gender identity, but in a way that I've not heard someone tackle gender identity before. So yeah, HMLTD, West of Eden, great album. See you next time.
And thank you for that, Sammy. That was another one of Sammy.
Now we're going over to Sammy Bacon.
Someone was trying to... Oh, dangerous.
Tom keeps on doing things.
In the ring tonight, we have Tom versus... Oh, I'm Sammy.
Standing in the red corner.
Oh, we're suspended.
Oh, I like music.
So, guys, I would like to just give the listeners the context that if you tune into episode 45, we have Tom and Alara on the show. They were talking about their voice acting, and they may or may not have, impersonated Sammy, and Sammy may or may not have now started a little mini My Generation podcast war.
Oh, it's not mini, it's full scale. Like, I'm getting the...
Well, I can't wait for like an hour or so into the episode, and it's all of a sudden Sammy's going to be like in a different conversation and go, and another thing!
Anyway, I'm going to mute my microphone from talking to you now.
So thank you for that, Sammy. I don't even know if I'm going to leave the bit in we just heard, but that was Sammy Bacon with his album reviews. that we have every single Thursday on the My Generation podcast. Thank you, Sammy, for that. That was very insightful stuff. We're now going to move over to our music feature. Renegade, they're a local Kent artist. We had them on episode 31 of the show. They're a really great band, and I actually recorded their live set at Battle of the Bands at the sort of end of January, early February time. And we're going to be playing two of their songs on today's show. One of them we're actually going to be making a music video for with Renegade. Harry's helping me. We're actually going to be filming it, so the song you're about to hear will actually be producing a music video for that song, and it's Down by Renegade.
Who's ready?
And another thing.
And thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you have a one-of-a-kind signed Scroungy Bobbins CD?
That's correct. Signed by one of the members from Scroungy Bobbins, who is now no longer with Scroungy Bobbins. For context listeners, Connor, he gave me on the 15th episode of the show when we had him on for the Power of Music a signed copy of his CD from Scroungy Bobbins, which I've still got. And you can find pictures of that on the My Generation Podcast Facebook page, which is the perfect time to plug the fact that we're on Facebook. And if you've enjoyed the episode so far, the 1 year anniversary celebratory special, head over to the My Generation Podcast Facebook page and let us know what you think of the episode. I would love to keep the conversation going about this episode. It's been just great. And before we go to the second topic, which is looking ahead to the new year, where we'll go back to all of the guests, I just wanted to go to Harry Munday. Harry's film reviews. We're going to put in one of Harry's film reviews into this episode. Even though he's not joining the show for a couple of weeks, we're just going to tease ahead to the coming content of film reviews. Harry, would you like to intro your own section?
Oh yes. Upcoming now will be the first ever Monday film review. Enjoy.
Hi all. Dear old Harry here. This week's movie recommendation is the Iranian masterpiece known as This Is Not a Film. And I say this is not a film because that is the most clever title I've ever heard used in a film. The context for it literally applies to the director is, of course, Iranian, as I said before, but he was put under house arrest and had his directing license stripped away from him. And it was made illegal for him to even hold a camera for the next, few years. But this man simply got around it by just pulling out his phone and just filming a day in his flat. That's all he did. Just a day in his flat of how he comes up with movies, how he visions them out, how he directs them in such a magnificent way. And simply saying it, this is not a film. This is just raw life in essence. This movie went through the cliche of having to be smuggled out of the country inside a USB stick that was inside a cake until it was delivered to France, where it was submitted for festivals. And it's just so mad to see this man just go through the whole creative process. It's just such an enlightenment way to sort of gain appreciation for what the directing process is. To anyone who's not really that knowledgeable on it or wants to get more into foreign films, I would say this is an amazing place to start. Go ahead and watch Iranian masterpiece. This is not a film straight away.
Thank you for that, Harry. We're going to be tuning in with Harry every single week on the My Generation podcast very, very soon to talk about film reviews every single week on the show. And then even later down the line, we've got Emma and Joe coming to the show. So now I'd like to look ahead to what we've got planned for the next 365 days. What we want to do once, we're out of isolation and we're back able to return to a sense of normality. So first, I just wanted to throw to Alara. Alara, what have you, because I know you're going through university at the moment and studying drama, what have you got planned? What are you excited for in the next year?
I'm definitely going to be excited for my last year in the uni and the graduation. Hopefully it will happen. Hopefully I will graduate. We'll see. But yeah, mostly about being in plays and being productive most of the time, and I really want to actually travel as well. Because this year, basically, I was just working all the time and I had no chance to actually enjoy the time I was living in. So I'm planning to enjoy the time and work.
And where would you like to travel?
Oh, what a great question. First, I really want to go to Paris, somewhere close, somewhere near. And then I would love to go to New York.
Oh, okay. Why New York?
To watch all the beautiful plays in there. It's just the musicals that I really want to watch.
Yeah, we might have to do a podcast episode about musicals because they do come up quite a lot. I know, Sammy, you're also a big theatre person, a theatre goer as well, aren't you?
Yep, I actually was meant to. Well, it's a ballet. I wanted to see the Red Shoes at the Marlowe. They've cancelled the ticket, but I'm hoping when all of this is finished, going forward, I'll try and at least see one play a month, potentially go around and just get my hands on things and see if I can do that. Just look forward to things like that, just go back into the normalcy over the next year, whatever that may look like. So, and hopefully do a bit of travel.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know from Sammy and Alara, what is your favourite play that you've seen so far, ever?
I have to think about this now.
Phantom of the Opera musical. That was absolutely brilliant. That's hard, man. Well, for me, that was memorable. How about you?
For me, I watched a production from Schaubühne. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a theater in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And they did Macbeth with 6 people. I think that was fascinating. And it was all like dirt on the floor. And I don't know how they kept going for 3 hours, but it was just beautiful. Even though I didn't understand majority of the things that we're saying because it was in German. But I know the play, so I think the set, the acting, it was just perfect. And for a musical, I would say Le Mythe that I watched in West End was pretty good.
Amazing. So many already great things you've seen, and the plan for the future to just keep, well, for Sammy, watching as much as possible, and then Alara being in as much as possible.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, 2 ends of the same thing, isn't it? Got to go watch these guys perform. But I think I would say, Max, the play about Brexit, the one.
Oh yeah, I wrote a play. I forgot. I haven't talked about that on the show before.
Oh, sorry.
You wrote a play?
Yeah. I wrote a 60-minute play that got put on at the Marlowe studio.
I think that's quite eye-opening. I got to see that, and I thought that was pretty good. It really was one that made you think, and yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the play, for context, I might have to talk about what the writing process was like, but basically it was in the sort of lead up to Brexit, but I wanted to write, I was brought on by the Marlowe as like a young person's perspective, and it was about me basically taking in everyone's opinions and sort of giving a really rounded view of it all, trying to give as much perspective as possible in 60 minutes, and dipping into the past and how the past has influenced what was happening then. And that feels like a lifetime ago, but in reality it was only over a year ago when that play went on. And we're also, I might have to do a full episode, so if you want to hear that, let me know in the comments, and I'll do a full episode on what that was like. But Sammy, we're also in a very interesting position here with this current situation with the podcast, because we are doing an episode coming very soon talking about the Drama Society performance that Alara directed, and so it actually starred a few people in this conversation. So it starred myself, Harry Munday, Sammy Bacon, Alara and Tom were all in the play, and actually coincidentally Sammy was in the audience. So Sammy, I wanted to ask what you thought of it from an audience perspective.
Be kind.
I'm so excited.
Brilliant. Well done, guys. I think I said that in person to some of you that I met. I was really glad that I got a seat. I was there really ahead of time to try and make sure I got a place to sit. So I was really lucky to get a really good spot and watch you guys perform. Fantastic work. Loved it. Intense, but loved it.
It was a bit
Is
intense, yeah.
intense a good way of explaining the play without giving it much away? I'm guessing it was recorded, wasn't it?
Yeah, Lara, would you say that's a fair representation of what the piece was like?
Yeah, I really like the word intense. it tells a lot. But yeah, did you? I just want to ask her a question.
Go for it.
Though. So, what at the end with all the with the main character and the characters that were doing the monologues, what did you understand at the end? Who were we?
It's life, all of us.
Yeah.
It's relatable by all. I felt it was a reflection of, because different strands of the stories, everyone could relate to parts of it or most of it, depending on what you have experienced in life. I thought it's a journey of life, really. That's how I felt.
Oh, well, lovely. And you know what? It was filmed. And if you go onto my personal Facebook page, you just search Max Barrett. I should be near the top, I think, maybe. There's not many of us. Then we did film it, and it's on my timeline. It's called The Downside of Being Human. The whole thing was filmed. It was about an hour and 10 minutes long, I think. And we filmed the whole thing. So the play that Alara directed, we're going to be talking about it on the show very, very soon in the build-up to hopefully the next year of Drama Society. And so that play it's still, having all the plaudits it deserves, and it will be there still on my Facebook page. And maybe when this episode comes around, I'll try and reshare it so you can see it. If you want to find it and you can't find it, let me know. I'll provide the link so you can see the full play that Alara directed, Tom starred in, myself, Sammy, and Harry. And I now want to go back to the rest of the group and keep talking about things we're looking forward to in the coming year. I wanted to go to Dan. Dan Inwards, let's bring you back in, Dan. What things are you excited about that are coming up in the next year for you?
My personal freedom, the end of the global pandemic that's keeping us all inside. Otherwise, who the hell knows? What's the best way of putting this? Puts people's personal lives really into sharp focus. And it's something that gives people a lot of cause for reflection and potentially thinking about what can be changed moving forwards. As such, I don't think I've been able to come to any sort of firm conclusions right now, but it's certainly a time for introspection and working out how best to spend the rest of the summer season if we still have some.
Yeah, true. So it's definitely become quite a reflective time for you, and that reflection is something that's going to carry on in the future. That's a positive outlook on it. And Harry, for you, what have you got going forward that you're excited about? Because I know we do a lot of film stuff together. So is there anything that's exciting you?
Well, I don't know if I can't say this. I think me and you have a long-term project.
Very true.
I'm very much looking forward to that, because that means I get to do a lot of paperwork. Yay!
Which is Harry's favourite part of the filmmaking process.
I'm that weird that will turn up on set with a big folder, and I will just be signing sheets of paper all day.
And so that's under wraps at the minute. But we've got so many filmmaking things between me and Harry and the beautiful people in our groups that are coming up over the next couple of years, really, haven't we? We're thinking way ahead with this stuff.
Oh yeah, we're already thinking of a film to do next year, aren't we?
Oh yeah, third year film's coming out, and the same way that Alara's looking forward to being in theatre stuff over the next year, and we're looking forward to that. So you can find Alara's links on the My Generation podcast page for any theatre endeavours coming up, and the same with me and Harry. There'll be film endeavours, and in fact, Dan, I just wanted to throw back to you for a second, because we've had the discussion with Joe as well about video games, and a video game that came up on the show. I believe it was on the 26th episode of the show was Factorio, and I did want to just check in on your Factorio progress, because I know that you basically completed the game, right?
Completed it, yes. Then it got a bit ridiculous. I carried on work on what I was doing, treating it as a project, and it got a little bit ridiculous. For anyone that is interested in such things, I got up to about 15 rocket launches a minute. Which is an absurd amount of work. And
Factorio, that's a game where basically you produce rockets, isn't it?
The aim of the game really is, the real enemy is the game itself. But the aim of the game is to build one rocket and launch it into space. And I'm now at the point where I'm doing that 15 times a minute, which is a bit of a milestone. It's pretty serious. I've kind of let it go a little bit. I have... tried to take on different games, different projects, bits like that, and I'm having fun playing things that aren't Factorio.
Yeah, it's the kind of game you just can't escape from. And Joe and Dan, are they looking forward? Are there any games that you both are looking to play?
I've been playing. It's kind of a similar game called Stardew Valley that I think we covered in one of the podcast episodes. I don't know if you played that, Dan. It's kind of similar in terms of how the structure of the game plays. I guess in terms of it's just a farm instead of like a construction. Yeah, you're sort of just building a farm up, and you can do sort of co-op with a friend. So I've been doing a lot of that recently. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the game that's going to be keeping me busy during the lockdown.
Yeah, and I think having a game like that, which can keep you busy and keep you going, is quite important. I wanted to go next to Tom. What have you got coming up in the next year that you're really looking forward to?
In the next year, so obviously going into my third year, I'm going to start doing dissertation, which I actually am excited for because I'm going to be doing it on something that I think I'll enjoy, folklore and mythology and its impact. And then after that, again, as I think most people want to do, I'm planning on going traveling. I'd like to go to the Central Americas, kind of travel up to Los Angeles, maybe dip around in the Bahamas.
Why the Central Americas? Why is that where you want to travel?
So when I was in secondary school, I was a part of World Challenge, which was where it's kind of a company that takes secondary school students out around to certain areas of the world. And when I went, we called it the Yunnan Overland, but what it was effectively Thailand, Laos, part of southern China, and Vietnam. And then I went back to Vietnam with my family, so that was really nice to explore. And it was really that's a massive culture shock. Being in a different place entirely. And then I've been, obviously, with my family to Europe, so places like Italy and Spain. But I haven't really been to... I went to America once, to Vermont, to go skiing, but not really in the South... I didn't really go to South America or Central America. So I think that'll be somewhere that, for an archaeology student, it would be really interesting to see all the different sites there, because of the Mayans and things. And it's just I haven't been there, and I like exploring new places. So it just sounds like a really so here's another thing. There was a period of my life where I really got into pirates, buying like books and stuff. Historically though, not like the classic pirates. Thank you very much.
That was Sammy laughing. I promise.
All right. Like Sammy's ever been interested in something fun.
Oh my God. Hey. I'm not with friends. What's going on?
We're close friends, Sam. So that's why I know you can take it.
I can't, Sam. You broke my heart.
And so obviously I want to go to there's somewhere called Nassau or New Providence Island, which used to be a hub of piracy back in the late 1700s, and I'd like to go there. Early 1700s, late 1600s. Sorry.
Oh, amazing. Well, yeah, you've got quite a lot of places to travel, and you did it almost without calling out Sammy.
It was hard, actually. I was bursting at the seams, and I had to do it. I love you, Sam.
Okay.
So, I promise that these two are best friends, and this is not serious. So, we're next going to move over to Connor Jenkins. Connor, I mean, I don't know how you can really follow up Tom wanting to become a pirate in the next year, but what have you got coming up in the next year that you're really excited for?
There's a couple of bits. I was planning on doing the 3 Peaks Challenge, which I'm currently raising money for. Speaking of, who was it that mentioned Snowden earlier? That'll be one of the missions of that 3-day trip. But I think the more important thing is, Max, do you remember the very first time I came on the show?
Vividly.
And it was about the music. No, the second time. Music. And I mentioned my upcoming...
that was that thing you do.
That's the one. So we were planning on putting out some music this year on the Hush Hush download, but that's really kind of been interrupted by all this quarantine thing. But hopefully it will pick up a bit more and we'll actually be able to do something. In the meantime, we have just put out a demo they made a little quarantine music video for, which I think I may have sent you. I'm not sure.
I've seen it. It was very good.
Oh, dude, that was fun. But yeah, we've got a lot of band stuff coming, so I'm super stoked to get that going. It's going to be a big adventure for us all.
Yeah, and I think and musically, I've spoken to a lot of people about what they're doing to keep busy. I mean, Renegade, who we spoke to before, they're still doing band rehearsal sessions over FaceTime, and some people are like being encouraged to start music for the first time, like our very own Sammy Bacon, who's starting to just dip his toes into music, aren't you, Sammy?
Yeah. Under the moniker Tina Weymouth Part 2.
It's a big name, and you can find it on Instagram.
You can, if you like music, head on down. It's fine. That's how I describe it. It's fine.
It's fine. I love that.
But at the same time, Sammy, you're just starting out, aren't you? So it's a good a time as any to start. Is music something you, and among other things, you want to expand on in the coming year?
Well, I've always. I say always, for the past sort of year or so, I've always kind of wanted to learn a musical instrument. And we've had like this dusty old keyboard in the attic, and I thought no better time than in forced isolation and to learn. So I've dug that out. So I am actually trying to learn proper piano, and then through that, there's like loads of like settings on it, and then just messing around with those and kind of making like very drony, ambient-y kind of stuff is fun. But yeah, I've been in bands of varying longevity and goodness, but yeah, music has always been like the big dream goal. So we'll just see what happens though,
And when Sammy's in like platinum album award winning, he'll be back on the My Generation podcast in 20 years talking about his
I'll dedicate all of my success to the My Generation podcast.
Let's just make sure we get an audio clip of that and people remember he said that like an hour and 10 minutes into one random episode of the show.
They'll come back and be like, you said this.
But no, we're definitely going to have to get Sammy on the show to talk about music as it expands, because it's clearly a massive passion. And Emma, keeping on the sort of, Sammy's stuff's very musical and more ambient, and you're into poetry. So what... Besides helping out on the podcast with your poetry work, what's sort of the next step for you?
I'm kind of looking forward to the summer. Hopefully at the moment, the festival that I'm still going to is going to be happening. That's in Bristol, because Download was cancelled.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, really sad. But other than going to that festival, which is called Arctangent, I kind of am looking forward to becoming. So I'm already a qualified ecologist, but I want to become a licensed ecologist, which you have to pay for. And obviously at the moment I'm not. I've been, what's it called, furlonged or something. So I'm not working, but I'm earning money, and it's hard to pay for it. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and all of the volunteering stuff I do with Kent Wildlife has all been paused and stuff at the moment. So I can't actually do anything like experience wise to kind of get my foot in that, really. So it's mainly my career.
Yeah, well, it gives you now really a chance and a time to focus on that in a way like never before. I know the film industry is still kicking and moving along as a result of all of this. Like, people are still, when not having all this time, actually trying to make things, and I think that's really wonderful. And you're obviously still making poetry in your own time.
Yeah, I am trying to keep up with it. It's hard to get creativity flowing when all I'm really doing is going in my garden and walking to the beach. But obviously walking to the beach is still quite nice. Obviously get my hour walk in. But yeah, I think it's more so just I'm kind of like eager to start my career, because I've done so much work in it. I just haven't like started it yet. I kind of want to take a year out after my master's degree and just kind of chill out, because it was very intense for me. And feel like it's really, that whole take a year out has really kind of dawned on me now, as I'm like, I've solidly taken a year out. I feel like I've taken a year in these 3 weeks we've had off already.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel that. And keeping that motivation is always an interesting thing. We got a comment on the Facebook page from George Shaft. George actually has been on the show as well. He was a great guest. We had him on episode 20, where we spoke about the novel writing process, because he's been working on a fantasy novel for years now, and so inspiration and determination are big words for him. And his comment read like this, and it's over. You can check it out on the podcast page. It says, asking me when I asked if, there were for things we wanted to talk about on the show, he said, how you keep finding the determination to go through with everything. Your guys' sheer work ethic and perseverance is something very interesting, and I'd love to hear everyone talk about. Thank you for that, George. Thank you for the kind words as well. Really, really appreciate that. George was a great guest. Check out episode 20 for that chat. So perseverance and motivation. I want to just have a brief quick chat about it. I'd love to talk to Sammy quickly about it as we start to bring the episode to a close as well. But for determination in this time, I think for me, and I don't know about everyone else, but it's still having always got some bit of work to try and look forward to. Making your own projects. This is the time to start passion projects. The same way Sammy has with his musical endeavours, the same way Emma is currently doing with her career, and what I'm trying to do by keeping this podcast going and actually doing a lot of work for within radio as well. If you check out my Facebook page, I should have loads of all that stuff that I'm doing on at the moment. As we start to wrap up the episode, Sammy, I'd like to know from you what you do to keep motivated through this time.
The way I've looked at it is having a structure, putting your, reflecting on the day ahead on it and taking it daily basis. Yeah, I think my the people that I'm having those contacts with, friends and family, using technology to support you, to make conversations like us meeting via Skype versus, in person. So I think having the structure, making those appointments with friends and family, I think has been very helpful. I am in full-time work, and I am also designated as an essential worker, so I have to go to work every day. So that kind of also gives me a purpose. But I've also had the opportunity to work on some projects that I've been meaning to do. I'm back into my writing. So that's been really good as well. So finding ways that brings yourself some joy. So I think that's another way I've looked.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, Sammy, we haven't for you and Dan, we haven't really spoken too much about Meetup. I'd like to just a little bit at the end, but staying in communication with people is so important, and I've tried to throughout this not just do work to try and balance it, and it's why I did bring video games back into my life. And like having, Harry, we have a routine of playing a little bit of Apex and having a catch up. And with Rosie, big shout out to Rosie, who hasn't been on the podcast, but shout out to her.
Oh, she will be soon.
Yeah, we'll get Rosie on the show. And Harry, did you want to just talk about like that importance of just staying in contact with people and keeping that communication going?
Oh, yes. I can't even lie. I'm speaking to more people now than I have ever in my life. It's weird because it's sort of like as you branch out to sort of reach to your friends again, they're also branching out to their friends that you never spoke to, and you just end up talking to those extensions. And yeah, even with this little gaming thing that you were saying about, I've been speaking to Americans about this, like, for the first time. I'm crossing the sea via Xbox.
It's magic.
I think especially in times that are quite challenging, because I have a friend who lost a parent to this horrible disease last week. So because we can't physically go see people, give someone a hug, hold their hand through challenging times, I think having those regular contact points so that they know you're available and they have someone to speak as vice versa. We don't know how long this will go for. So I think having those contacts in any format, from Meetup to Skype or just picking up the phone and ringing somebody, I think that's really, really important for everybody. So it was just sending a text message that turned into a phone call. So just find out what your friends are up to, see how they are in whichever format you do it. I think that's probably going to be quite supportive to build that structure around.
I think it has opened a lot of people's eyes in terms of just how precious life is. Like having a situation like this where everyone is sort of locked down, it's making people realise that, like, it's a cliche, but life is too short to sort of not make these connections.
Mm.
So I think even like little things like when we're taking, like now obviously, like in my house we're taking doing a lot more online deliveries, and just having someone like the delivery driver giving us our delivery, they're always wanting to have a conversation, and it's like, you feel like that never would have happened if we weren't in this situation where people are just like trying to reach out anyone just to have a conversation in those small moments.
Yeah, and I think that is so important that we are doing that. I mean, I just wanted to throw it back to Dan, if you can still hear me at the moment, Dan, about Meetup and what we're doing on there, and how, because Meetup is a social media app. We're not sponsored by them in any way, but Meetup has a close place in my heart because it's where I met some of the wonderful people in this chat at the moment. It's a big part of my social circle, and you'd think an app where it's oriented around you meeting people in real life would kind of not really continue on from this. But Dan, we've attended virtual meetups, haven't we?
That's right, yes. Meetup, as you know, has been a proud sponsor of the podcast.
Damn it, Dan.
And what they've been able to do is what Meetup has done at the moment is pivoted to providing a sort of a hosting and grouping service for people to host online events. So we have, myself and Max have attended a couple of events online, which were quizzes, and they come in all shapes and sizes. There were just hangouts where people just have sort of a chill hang online. People do all sorts of different games. I've seen 6 or 7 different varieties of, just quizzes and little bits that people can work on from the comfort and safety of their own homes, and enjoy that social sort of aspect of it as well. So it's nice to see technology being leveraged in this way to help people.
Yeah, I think that is, and it's so important. Like, if you don't have anyone to reach out to at the minute socially, Meetup is a great place because it is encouraging people who don't know each other to still meet each other via an online space. So sign up to Meetup, find a group that's local to you, and attend some of their online events. It kind of brings it full circle straight back to the first episode of the show, which I think is a great place to start wrapping up this week's show. I do want to tease ahead to a few more things we've got coming up on the podcast as we go into the brand new year of My Generation podcast, the first wave of year 2. And these are all episodes that have already been recorded because I've still got a bit of a back catalogue of episodes that we recorded before the quarantine that still haven't come out yet. So including these 3, which is Love Reptiles, who are coming on about their music creating process. They're another local Kent band. They're a rock band, and we're talking all about what it's like making music with that band. We have Emma Cusson, coincidentally, who we've had on today's show. Emma is coming on to talk about her poetry in full glorious detail. Please do tune into that. Just bear in mind that episode was recorded before the lockdown. And Owen Laws, he's a filmmaker that Harry knows. He was on our course with us for a bit, but he went away from the university experience to make a film on his own, and he talks about what it was like beginning that process. Again, all filmed before the quarantine. I put in the description of every single podcast episode whether with the context of its filming days and recording days, so if anything is said to do with the context that confuses you a little bit, that's why, as it may have been recorded earlier and beforehand. But that does begin to conclude this week's episode of the show. I'm going to go back to everyone just to ask for one last closing statement from each person. But before I do, we're going back to Renegade Live. They are a rock band based in the Whitstable, Herne Bay, Canterbury area, and I recorded their Battle of the Bands live set from back in the end of January, early February time. And here is their song, Masquerade. And that was Renegade with their song Masquerade here on the My Generation podcast. We're now going to begin to close this week's episode of the My Generation podcast. What could be the longest episode of the show, but very fitting to be the 1 year anniversary to have it as the longest episode. And that would eclipse the previous longest episode, which was Connor Jenkins.
I won't have it.
But then you're going to have to shut down this podcast really quick, Connor. So I'd just like to have one sort of final statement from each person. I'm going to go back to everyone in the order we introduced them and just reflect on what they've learned by talking on this week's 1 year anniversary of the show, starting with the man who was on the first episode, Daniel Inwood.
I've learned about the value of getting a wide variety of people to all come, express their experiences and talk about what they love and what they're passionate about, and just seeing how much we can all benefit from.
Lovely. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And next, moving on to Harry Munday. What have you learnt today?
And you just start worrying about the now and start having a plan for where the now is going to take me in the future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Harry. Really appreciate you coming on. And Sammy, what have you learnt from talking on this week's episode of the show?
There's some very creative people, and I look forward to listening to more of, and maybe talking a little bit more about travel with all of you.
Oh, lovely. Yes, we definitely have to do more travel episodes on the show. I'm gauging that everyone wants to go to so many fascinating places. Connor, what about you? What have you learned from this week's show?
I need to bag myself a Lego Slave 1, I believe is the kicker there. No, honestly, I think I've actually learned about the power of podcasts and communication and stuff. All these people here are awesome with their own stories and backstories and the rest. And I'm thinking about it now. We might be providing some serious entertainment for somebody who's stuck during this quarantine time, and that kind of makes me happy. It makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself and just us. It's great. This is thanks for having me on again.
No problem at all. Well, thank you for that, Connor. We're definitely, and it might be over Skype again that we do this, but Harry, Tom, and Connor, we're doing a Lego episode. That is happening. So please stay tuned. I've actually been, as we've been going, I've been typing up, hey Max, make sure you remember to do a Lego podcast episode. So I've already got it planned in.
You should do a podcast episode where you film us making.
Oh my god.
I was about to say that.
If you guys do, we're gonna have it all planned out, and in year 2 of My Generation podcast, we're gonna have some Lego that you'll be able to see on the social media alongside the episode that we record. So stay tuned for that. It's gonna be an absolutely great one. A build off. Oh my god, let's do a build off. Yes.
We all buy the same set, and whoever does it quicker wins like a chocolate.
Yeah, so what we have to do, we all buy the same set, and then we all have to make something different out of what the content of that set was, and then we have to present it in the episode.
Oh, I like that idea better.
That sounds good, actually.
Yeah, I know, because I quite like doing that. I've sometimes bought a set because I'll see like a piece or two that I like, and I think it's got good minifigures, so I like that. And then I like a couple of the pieces, and I'll buy it, and I'll just make something different out of that pack of parts. So let's put that together. We'll make that episode.
Have you not seen the Lego movie? You're meant to follow the instructions.
Oh, honestly, I did not follow the moral of that story. I walked out going, I'm still going to build this.
I just walked out like I needed to buy more Lego, so.
I preferred it when he did destroy it. I preferred the city, I was unhappy.
Well, I was quite impressed with that city. The child had to go and ruin it all by just making everything.
Stay here for the Lego podcast.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you, Connor, for being our voice of reason. I'm so excited to bring that episode to everyone. As you can tell, we might have to do 2 or 3 Lego podcasts. Wow, a few. I'm surprised we didn't have a fully fledged episode about it in the first year. But hey ho. Moving over to Joe. Let's take another turn. So Joe, what have you learned from being on this week's episode of the show?
Just the variety of different people and different topics that people cover with their interests and hobbies, and it's made me realise there's a few things that I'd consider sort of minor hobbies of mine that I've actually been more willing to take more of an interest in as a result of some of the podcasts. Things like the writing that we spoke about, that you did a podcast episode on that, and that kind of made me feel a little bit inspired to get back more into that.
Amazing. And yeah, I think podcasts are such a powerful thing in a time like this. I know this episode's releasing on the 28th of May for the 1 year anniversary, and I hope whatever world you're in, it's a safe one, and hopefully some of this, what we're talking about still holds true and is able to help you in the future. But Sammy, moving next to you, what do you think you've learned from talking on this week's episode of the show?
I've learned that this Lego episode is going to be about 9 hours long, and it's going to be Unbelievable. I don't know. I think, the power of a podcast. And how it can reach people and how these kind of things are very important in these bizarre times.
Yes.
I've also learned I can talk a lot, which, listen, I've got a lot of things I need to settle, I've been bottling it all up. It's all coming out, man.
Yeah, second year of the podcast. Watch out, Sammy is going to be back on the show in full force, so we'll get ready for that. And I know that we've had a lot of answers at this point, but Alara, what have you learned about being on this episode?
I learned that no matter what happens in this world, we shouldn't even stop creating for 1 second, because we have varieties of people here, and we were all talking about how we create stuff, how we're doing stuff in this quarantine time, and how to keep our physical or mental health in the right space. So I would say creating no matter what happens.
Beautiful. And Tom, lastly, to finish off, what have you learned? And try and keep the buzzword of Lego out of what you're about to say. What have you learned about being on this episode of the show?
Okay, well, so these building bricks, which what I've learned, there's so many passionate people who are busy and who are interesting and who are doing stuff when there's nothing else to do, and it's just so wonderful to see people still being passionate during isolation and things. Like Max doing your various projects and traveling and poetry. Obviously, traveling not now, but in the future. And poetry and Sammy with his vinyls. It's just great to see people really passionate about lots of things. And I'd love to know, Max, have you ever been asked you've learned?
Ooh. Oh, I've had it thrown back at me. Here we go. No, I haven't actually. This is a My Generation podcast first, where the podcaster becomes the podcastee. So what I've learned from this week's episode of the show is just how it's more reaffirmed the reason I got into radio. So the first, this actually ties it all the way back to the first episode, and this is also quite a beautiful way to end, and it'll probably be the last point, is that I did the first episode of the podcast as a result of a social media detox where I went to Brighton for 3 days, turned off all my social media, and I did nothing. I just relaxed, had time and thoughts to myself, went on a few walks, and did nothing. It was great. And on that time, I was at a crossroads in my life. It was May 2019, and there were lots of change in my life. There was a series of about 6 or 7 changes that all hit me at once, and I wasn't sure where to go. So I went on that social detox, and I took one book with me about radio and about podcasting, and it taught me one message, which was the reason why I do this medium and why I do this podcast, and this episode has only reaffirmed that, which is the audio is the loneliest medium. It's for people who are sat in a car driving somewhere. It's for someone who's cleaning up at home, or for someone who's at work and they're sat at a desk and they can listen. It gives a voice to someone who has no one there in the room with them. And the fact that I knew that with my podcast, with my work that I do in radio, that's all what it was leading to, meant every episode, every day, everything was kind of worth it. And I think that is what this has only reaffirmed, with hearing all of your beautiful stories that you've all brought to the show today again, and expanded on in a way I wouldn't have thought of. So yeah, Tom, I hope that answers your question.
Is that what you've been searching for every time you pass that?
And on that note, I think that concludes this week's insanely massive 1-year anniversary of the show. Well, thank you all very much for coming along. Every single person that I can see on screen now, and I've got a picture of on the screen, will be back on the My Generation podcast in the new year 2. So I very much look forward to having all of you along for the next episode. And if you want to get in touch and potentially come on the show for an episode of your own, get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation podcast. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll tune in with you in year 2 of the My Generation podcast.